You guys see me? All right, howdy. Hope everyone's having a blessed Saturday. Won't take up too much of your time. I just wanted to touch upon Mark chapter 5 and even the last few verses of Mark chapter 4. I've read these verses and these stories countless times, literally hundreds of times, but this morning as I was reading it, it was just incredible. Like, the Holy Spirit was like filtered to me just ever so slightly when I was reading this. So it begins at the end of Mark chapter 4. That's when they're going across the lake, Jesus and his disciples. There's a terrible storm, and Jesus is sleeping, and he awakes from his slumber because his disciples tell him, Master, we're drowning, we're going to drown, oh my God. And Jesus just quietly wakes up and says to the waves, quiet down. And then he rebukes his disciples, stating, why were you so fearful? Don't you even yet have confidence in me? And then his disciples were filled with awe and said amongst themselves, who is this man that even the winds and seas obey him? Now, when people argue if Jesus was God in the flesh, or if he even claimed God was in the Jesus said or demonstrated or showcased that he was God in the flesh, Christian apologists normally will refer to the famous verse in John in which he says, and he's arguing with the Pharisees, before Abraham, I tell you earnestly, I'm paraphrasing here, but I am, meaning, God. That's fine to utilize that, but there is so much more in the New Testament in which Jesus is showing that he's God amongst us. He is much, much more than just a prophet. Anyways, I don't want to dive too deep into that, but that's the problem with just picking out Bible verses and not reading things fully in its context. Like, I haven't even officially gotten to chapter 5 yet, but chapter 4 concludes with he just wakes up from his slumber, tells the waves to quiet down, and then nonchalantly tells his disciples, like, what are you guys so fearful about? I mean, to me, that doesn't sound like merely a prophet. I mean, that sounds like the power of God instilled in the flesh. Okay, now Mark chapter 5, he quiets down the storm, and now they get to the other side of the lake, and immediately upon arriving on the other side of the lake, the demon-possessed man with legion, which supposedly, mystically speaking, is one of the strongest demons, legion, Jesus casually casts out legion of this demon-possessed man, and he kind of toys with legion, the demons, insofar as that, they plead with Jesus Christ because they're going to submit to Jesus. They simply have no choice. And he says, well, Jesus, if you have to cast us out, please cast us into that herd of pigs over there on the mountaintop. And Jesus is like, okay. And then he's just toying with, like, supposedly one of the strongest demons. He's like, all right, and go into that herd of pigs over there. And immediately as that is done, that herd of pigs tumbles over the mountaintop into the water and they drown. Okay, so that's number 2. And number 3, later in the day, as Jesus is walking from town to town, great crowds were pressing in upon him. A woman who had been sick for years with internal bleeding for 12 years just touches his robe, and Jesus says, who touched my clothes? And his disciples were saying, well, you got all this crowd around you, like, who knows who touched you? Like, everyone's touching you. And then he's like, no, I felt healing power, because basically I'm assuming that Jesus felt that someone believed in him so greatly that even if this individual just merely scraped his clothes, that they would be well. And he realizes, well, the woman confesses it was indeed her. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, healed of your disease." Now, what I find interesting about this is the wisdom in the Bible is simply timeless, just as God is outside of time. He's the Omega, the Alpha, and everything in between, the first and last, eternal. Now, listen to this. She had suffered much from many doctors throughout the years and had become poor from paying them, and was no better, but in fact was worse. She had heard about all the wonderful miracles Jesus did, and that is why she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his clothes. Now, in regards to the doctor, like the doctor's thing, and how not only was she not healed from all the doctors, but she was now poor and her condition was even worse. Sounds a lot like our contemporary age that we live in. Only Jesus can heal. Now, I don't want to speak in obsoletes like that. Modern medicine can be incredible, don't get me wrong, but ultimately Jesus is the ultimate healer, is what I'm saying. Okay, so that's number 3. And then finally, number 4 is, even this is happening simultaneously. Jairus, his daughter, is perceived dead, and messengers arrive to Jairus and say, well, there's no point in Jesus even coming to the home anymore because your daughter has passed away. But Jesus hears this and he says, don't be afraid, just trust me. Again, very nonchalant, completely in control of all these 4 situations. Some of them, they're essentially happening simultaneously. That's the craziest thing, or one right after the other. And then he, upon entering the home in which the daughter is perceived dead, he's saying, well, why all this weeping and commotion? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep. And everyone there laughs at him and whatnot. And then he simply takes the girl by the hand and tells her, get up, little girl. And she does. And she's alive and well. So yeah, next time someone tries to argue with you that Jesus is just merely a prophet, instead of just picking out certain Bible verses, especially from John and Luke, which are more of the fantastical readings or Gospels of Christ, if you will, at least in my opinion. Like Mark, when I read Mark, it's more upfront and not so fantastical. It's just merely describing things that unfolded. The verbiage isn't over the top, at least from what I see. It's just very straightforward and blunt. I would recommend, if you ever find yourself in that debate, or if someone is truly curious, and if you feel that they're trying to understand Jesus Christ better and who he indeed was, as Mark chapter 5, it's so short, it's barely a page long. Just tell them to read Mark chapter 5. That would be my recommendation. But just incredible. I've read these stories literally hundreds of times. And even like non-Christians or non-believers, they probably heard these stories, but just seeing it all together, and I don't know, this morning I just read it. I'm like, God is amazing.